Hi, this is Chuck Liedkowski, and welcome to this week's edition of Unfriendly Territory. This week, we're going to talk about the unfriendly territory of getting promoted. Why and what gets people promoted? There are some people who get promoted, and I've just scratched my head and thought, are you kidding me? I mean, do you know what they're like? I mean, and there's another part of me that says, you obviously don't know what I'm like because I'm just terrific compared to them. And there are all sorts of reasons why people get promoted. One of them is being born in the right place in the right time to the right family. Consider Queen Elizabeth. She's been a great queen of the United Kingdom for a long time. And when she was crowned and she ascended to the throne, she was given all the symbols of power. She was given a rod, an orb, a crown, and she had not gone on some long quest and performed some great thing. She didn't slay a dragon or save the world from panic. No, she was the eldest daughter of the second son of a king. And he had never expected to be king. It was going to be his older brother. But things happened, and that's what happened. Life happened, and it fell to him and then to her. Or think about what has happened in Oregon State. They have a football program that's doing great things. They're winning. The program's growing. So what have they done? Well, they've taken money and they've built a new football platform and a new football facility, and the head coach has a new office. It's a corner office at the top. It's got windows galore. It looks like a place right out of Manhattan. It's got all of the televisions and things. It's meant to impress. And that's what they've done. They've gotten it through success. And one of the things people always want when they have success is a big house. We lived in Fairfield County, Connecticut, which is just outside of New York, just across the border. And there were some of the biggest homes you'd ever want to see. People wanted to live in the country. And Fairfield, Connecticut, which, by the way, is the most expensive county in America to live in, people built big homes because they had success. And Joseph has success, and here in Genesis 41:41, Pharaoh turns and says to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. He puts him in charge. It's not like the TV show Charles in Charge. This is Joseph in charge. He changes his name tag and says, you are in charge, nobody else. He puts him in charge. And then Pharaoh gives him a signet ring from his finger, and he put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. These are not just things, nice little gifts. These were part and parcel of the things that were necessary to rule. Queen Elizabeth got an orb and a staff and a crown. The head of the football program got a new office and a new stadium. Joseph gets three things from Pharaoh. First of all, he gets a signet ring. And we've unearthed some signet rings from Egypt in tombs and things. And they're rings and they have little holes in them to put in, sink it into hot wax or into wet clay. Because that's how they did business. When you got presented with the bill, you didn't have a credit card to swipe it. You didn't have to go zip. No, you went and you took the signet ring and you drove it into the wax. You drove it into the mud. And it said, who's going to pay for it? By giving Joseph the signet ring, Pharaoh was saying, you have all of my money, all of the resources of all of Egypt. Secondly, he gave him a robe and a gold chain around his neck. The chain was very valuable. It was a reflection of his power. And the robes, again, when people saw Joseph, it wasn't like, well, this is his calling card. This is his business card. This says, this is who he is. And he works for Pharaoh. So I should take him seriously. And he was going to need these things. And that's Pharaoh, had Joseph ride in a chariot as the second in command. and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. He was in a prison. He had been in prison for a long time. He had been a slave before that. And now he comes up and goes from the penthouse all the way. That's where he is now. He's at the top. He came out of the gutter and he's made to ride in a chariot. Think about the most highly valued technology we have. Maybe it's the new uh, electric Tesla car that self-drives itself. Maybe it's the latest iPhone 6. No matter what it is, it's nothing. It pales in comparison to the technology that Joseph had access to, and that was a chariot. This was the best piece of technology. It was built for speed. It was also a way to demonstrate power. And Pharaoh then said to Joseph in Genesis 41:44, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift a hand in all of Egypt. He says, you've got all of my power. You have the symbols, and I'm standing behind you, and nobody can do anything. He gives a book out to everybody in Egypt. It's Obedience for Dummies. He says, look, he says, Joseph has the signet ring, he's got the robe, he's got the gold necklace, he rides in the chariot, everybody's going to make way. You better pay attention to him because he speaks for me, and whenever he speaks, you listen. It's like those old commercials. Whenever E.H. Hutton speaks, everybody listens. That's the way it was with Joseph. And Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah and gave him Azareth, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout all the land of Egypt. Yeah, you know, his name was Joseph. Maybe your name is Joe or Mary or Diane or Sam. And he was given the name Azanath-Paneah. I think he lost out on the deal. Not only was he given a new name, he was given a new family. He was given a wife. And look at who the wife is. She is the daughter of a priest. This is somebody who did not share the same faith values that Joseph had. But Joseph doesn't say, well, you know what? I can't accept this. No, he receives it with open arms and welcomes her. And he receives her into his family. He then goes and gets to work. He doesn't sit at home. He gets to work. He goes out throughout the whole land of Egypt. He doesn't sit around drinking lattes because Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout the whole land. What he didn't do, he didn't print up business cards. He didn't go build a big house for himself. He didn't go have his own chariot and have special license plates made for it. He didn't go and get on his blog and say, you'll never guess what happened to me. And he wasn't interviewed by ENN, that's Egyptian News. He went to work. He went out through all the land of Egypt, and he started it of collecting and storing grain for 7 years. They've excavated some of these storage sites. We have these very deep pits lined with stones, and they have stairways so they could take the grain down and get it back up. These were marvelous pieces of engineering. He got to work. He didn't sit around. He didn't give interviews. He got to work. He didn't pop his jerseys or beat his chest like football or baseball players do. He got to work. And notice where he went. He was repeated. He went through the whole land, all of Egypt. There wasn't a town or village that he didn't know about because the famine was coming to all of Egypt. So he was getting all of Egypt ready. He created a distributed network of sites. And when Egypt began to feel the famine in 7 years, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. And Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, go to Joseph and do what he tells. These are marvelous words. He's been working at this for 7 years, storing away grain. He didn't say, well, it's 4 years, that's enough, or 5. I'm getting tired of it. I want something new. Or at the end of 6, he didn't say, well, gee whiz, I need a new challenge. No, he stayed at the task. Pharaoh had given him this role and he was going to see it through. And he says, go to Joseph. What a marvelous testimony that is, that a boss of 7 years had never doubted him and saw the progress that Joseph had made. And I'm sure had heard it or had gotten updates. And he said, go to Joseph. Go to Joseph. And I think we should go to Joseph to see what he did and how he went through this. And he was successful, he was promoted, and he worked hard. But just, the way I am, I do things a little weird. I skipped over what I think is perhaps the best part, one of the most meaningful things that happens in all the Old Testament. Remember, he got a wife and he had 2 sons. The first is Manasseh, and that name means God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. You see, he remembered growing up in that home far away, and it had 4 women, 4 wives, and a whole mess of kids, and there was lots of tension. He was the favorite, so he knew, and his brothers hated him. He remembered all that. But what did he do with it? He forgot it. Now, those cells were still working, but he said, God has made me to forget. Look at all the good things God has given. There's a scene in the movie Forrest Gump when Jenny comes to the house where she had been abused as a child, and she throws rock after rock at it. She finally collapses, and Forrest says, sometimes there's just not enough rocks. Psalm 27:10 says, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. Now, I know some of you have had parents, moms, dads, uncles, aunts, grandparents who have hurt you deeply. And you've been kicked around, you've been pushed around, you've been neglected, you've been abused. No more than Joseph. And yet he was willing to take on a new life that says, God has made me forget all of my troubles in my father's household. And there was a second son, Ephraim. God has made me fruitful in the land. Fruitfulness doesn't come up. It isn't you plant the seed and boom, it's there. No, it takes time. It takes effort. Storing away the grain took time. It took effort. It took work. It takes that kind of effort in the land of my suffering. Everywhere he looked, there were reminders of his past. There were reminders of the things that had gone wrong, the things he had said or done wrong, the things that had been done or said about him against him. And now he says, all that's over. Philippians 4 talks about the goal of being content. It's the elevator ride of life, up and down. And finally, Paul says, I have learned the secret of being content. It is, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength. That means if life goes up, I don't have to worry about being conceited because I'm going to hold it loosely. If life goes into a pit, God can get me through that. I can do all things through Christ. Think about this. There are many people you might be saying, well, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this punishment, the people hurting me. Maybe I have a medical condition. But just perhaps if God could take his perfect son, who had never done anything wrong, and treated him harshly, and he was beaten and forgotten and given up. He was murdered. But it was for a good cause. It was for an eternal cause where many would be blessed. Just perhaps the suffering that you go through and I go through could be used by the same great and powerful God for good for both us and those around us. Would you pray with me? Our Father and our God, I thank you that you love us and your care for us is big, big as all outdoors. bigger yet, because you are a big God. Help us to see your bigness through these things. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for listening. God bless and bye-bye.